Every tomato plant I've grown eventually looks like this. Thick, dark green, climbing past the top of the cage. And fewer red tomatoes than a scrawny plant 3 feet away. If you fed that plant again this week because the leaves looked strong, I see this every August. Same watering can, same fertilizer bag, same routine you started back in June. The plant looks like it's thriving, so the logic seems sound. Keep doing what's working. Except a handful of your tomatoes have been sitting green for 2 weeks now, and a few of the flowers near the top just dropped off without setting fruit at all. Here's what that actually costs you. Left on the same June routine through August, a plant like that often ripens a third fewer tomatoes than it's capable of, and the ones it does ripen take days longer to turn. The plant isn't sick, it's just still building itself instead of finishing what it already started. Stop the nitrogen today. Whatever all-purpose fertilizer you've been feeding it, put it away and switch to something higher in potassium and phosphorus, the kind labeled for blooming or fruiting vegetables. Feed at half the usual strength this time and skip the next scheduled feeding entirely. That single swap is the first thing that changes the plant's direction, and you'll want it done before you touch anything else on this list. Here's why that one change matters so much. Picture your tomato plant running 2 departments at once, growth and production. Nitrogen staffs up the growth department, more stems, more leaves, more square footage of green. Potassium and phosphorus staff production. They push energy into the fruit that's already hanging there. Keep feeding nitrogen in August, and you're hiring more people for a department that already has everything it needs, while the department actually shipping your tomatoes stays understaffed. Cut the nitrogen, and the plant has nowhere left to put its energy except into what's already on the vine. That's the first shift, and it's the one most people skip entirely. But it only solves part of the problem. Even with the right fertilizer, an indeterminate tomato plant will keep throwing new suckers, the little shoots that grow in the notch between the main stem and each branch. Left alone, every one of those becomes another stem competing for the same food and water your existing tomatoes need. Snap them off while they're still small, 2 or 3 inches, using your thumb and forefinger, right where they meet the main stem. Do this once a week through the rest of the season, and you'll notice the remaining fruit clusters filling out faster within about 10 days. If your variety is indeterminate, meaning it keeps growing taller instead of stopping at a set height, this is also the point to top the plant. Look at where you are relative to your first frost state. If you're roughly a month out, find the top of the main stem and pinch it off above the highest cluster of fruit you actually expect to ripen in time. This tells the plant to stop reaching upward and put everything into the tomatoes it already has. Skip this step entirely if you're growing a determinate variety, the compact kind that stops growing on its own once it reaches a certain height. Topping a determinate plant removes the very growth points it needs to produce its harvest, and you'll cut your yield instead of protecting it. A lot of gardeners assume topping works simply because it takes stress off the plant, one less thing for it to manage. That's not quite what's happening. A tomato plant doesn't distribute energy evenly across every leaf and stem. It sends the largest share to whichever point is growing most actively at that moment. And through most of the season, that's the topmost growing tip, reaching upward toward more light. Every leaf lower down is manufacturing sugar through photosynthesis and shipping a good portion of it straight up to feed that tip, even while fruit further down the vine is still sizing up. Remove that growing tip, and the plant has no upward destination left for that sugar. Within days, the flow redirects toward the nearest active sink, which is almost always the fruit clusters already hanging on the vine. That's the real reason topping speeds up ripening. Not less stress, but a physical rerouting of sugar the plant was already producing every day. Now for the question I get more than any other in August. Should you be pulling leaves off this plant? The honest answer is sometimes, and it depends on which leaves. Any leaf that's turned yellow, developed dark spots, or curled at the edges is no longer doing useful photosynthesis for the plant, and it can spread disease to healthy foliage nearby if you leave it. Remove those. But don't strip healthy green leaves just because they're shading a tomato you want to see turn red faster. Those leaves are still feeding the plant sugar it needs to ripen that very fruit, and pulling too many at once can actually slow ripening down while stressing the plant into dropping blossoms. Watering habits from July don't always carry over cleanly into August either. Heat spikes late in the season push people toward quick, shallow watering just to keep the leaves from wilting in the afternoon sun. That shallow watering is often the real reason for cracked tomatoes and blossom end rot, that leathery dark patch on the bottom of the fruit. It's rarely about too little calcium in your soil. It's about calcium arriving inconsistently because the water supply keeps swinging between too little and too much. Water deeply enough to soak the root zone, roughly 1 to 1.5 inches per week, including rainfall, and try to keep that rhythm steady rather than watering whenever the plant looks thirsty. Here's where a lot of gardeners misread what they're actually looking at, though. Wilting leaves in the middle of a hot afternoon get blamed on dry soil almost automatically, so the instinct is to grab the hose. But a tomato plant will droop under intense sun even with plenty of moisture at the roots, simply because it's losing water through its leaves faster than the roots can pull it back in. Check the soil 2 inches down before you water again. If it's still damp, that afternoon wilt is heat stress, not thirst, and the plant will usually stand back up on its own once evening temperatures drop. Watering on top of already moist soil because the leaves looked sad is exactly how a plant ends up sitting in soggy roots during the hottest, most fungus-friendly stretch of the season. That sets up the exact leaf diseases we're about to walk through. While you're out there working through all of this, take 30 seconds to actually look at the leaves instead of just pulling the yellow ones on autopilot. Early blight shows up as dark concentric rings on the lower, older leaves first, almost like a target pattern. Late blight moves faster and shows greasy, water-soaked patches that can turn a section of the plant brown within a couple of days. Septoria leaf spot looks like small circular spots with tan centers and dark edges, usually starting low on the plant and climbing. If you see any of these, remove the affected leaves immediately and get them off your property rather than tossing them in the compost pile, since all three can survive and spread from composted material. There's an exception worth knowing here too. Standard advice says strip lower leaves aggressively once disease shows up, but doing that all at once on a plant that's already carrying a heavy fruit load can backfire. Removing too much foliage in a single pass exposes the remaining fruit to direct afternoon sun it was never conditioned for, and a tomato that spent all season shaded by leaves can develop sun scald, a pale, papery patch on the side facing the light, within just a day or two of sudden exposure. Take affected leaves off in 2 or 3 passes spread across a week instead of stripping the plant bare in one visit, and the fruit has time to toughen up as the canopy thins. There's one more thing worth doing before you consider this plant handled for the month. Walk the plant and look for flowers or tiny pea-sized fruit that started very recently. If you're close enough to your first frost that a flower forming today has no realistic path to a ripe tomato, pinch it off now. It sounds counterintuitive to remove something that could become fruit, but that flower is drawing water and sugar away from tomatoes that are already sized up and actually have time to ripen. Every flower you remove at this stage is energy redirected toward fruit you'll actually pick. Here's the part that ties all of this together, and it's the piece most people miss even after they've made every change on this list. All of these steps point the plant in the same direction. Finish what you started instead of starting something new. The fertilizer switch stops new growth from being fed. The pruning removes growth that's already competing for resources. The leaf and watering adjustments protect the fruit you're trying to ripen. And removing late flowers stops the plant from investing in tomatoes that were never going to make it anyway. None of these are separate tricks. They're the same instruction, applied 5 different ways. And that's exactly why doing only 1 or 2 of them barely moves the needle, while doing all of them together is what actually shows up as more red tomatoes on the vine within 2 to 3 weeks. Go out today and do 2 things before anything else. Check what you fed that plant last and count how many tomatoes on it have actually started to turn. Tell me that number in the comments and which of these 5 changes you're skipping right now, because I guarantee it's costing you fruit. If this saved you from wasting another month feeding the wrong thing, subscribe. there's a lot more of the growing season left to get right.